Okay. So yesterday we looked into like how we can get this kind of list view in place, but today we'll be focusing a step beyond this. So as I mentioned earlier, the games that we are getting, the composable list of games that we are getting is something what we call hard-coded values. Okay, the hard-coded values we have are important within the model itself. You guys can see this is a list of games that was like basically it is looping through. But now what we're going to do is we're going to change this. Probably we won't get the same API like this one what we have, but something similar, something that we can work with. Okay, so in order to make sure that we are in the same page, anyone in here have heard the term REST APIs? Raise your hand, please, if you have heard the term REST API before. I know REST APIs. Okay, is there? Okay, so for the majority, I would simply explain what REST API is all about. Simply what we are trying to do using a REST API is like we'll be taking we'll be communicating with a service or server that is available out there, which we can retrieve some information from internet. So if you take, for example, when you are web browsing using a browser like Safari, Chrome, or whatever, basically what you are doing is you are making a request. The server is responding with HTML. Okay, most of the time it is the way that works. So browser understand HTML. It renders out the content using the Chrome, the engine that is supporting on everything. So the same way, what we can do is uh, we can um, we can actually um, we can actually we can actually get information other than HTML format. So um, the uh, the website most of the time they send HTML response, but there are occasions where we will get other formats. For example, most popular response types these days is JSON. Okay, so JSON is a JavaScript object notation. So basically, it is a way of representing information in a way that everyone can understand. Okay, so I'm not gonna go through JavaScript, JSON, or any other implementation how it works. So please take a look around it. We will be working with it, but it's up to you guys to make sure that it is done and understand what's going on there. Okay, so next thing that we're gonna do is we will be looking at um, looking at uh, looking at how we can interact with REST APIs. So REST API has a couple of methods we call, which we can send and retrieve data. Basically, most of the REST API has operations that we call CRUD operations. That means operations for creating resources, reading resources, updating, and deleting. Those are like most of the four fundamental operations that we do. So we can get some resources. That means if we ask some information, the REST API will give us information. For example, in this scenario, I would like to receive the information that I have put it in here, the Assassin's Creed, the game name, description, and an image. So there might be some open APIs or free APIs that I can ask, okay, give me 10 games APIs so I can test around it. So basically, uh, using that kind of communication mechanism, I can retrieve data in JSON format. So what I need to do next is to get this information and represent them or render these things in a more meaningful way like this. So what we will be getting is something like this. Okay, the data, I'm not saying it exactly like this. The JSON is a little bit different, or we will be getting the data that we need to render out these things. So we will retrieve those things from a REST API. Once we got those things, we will just visualize those things using 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 the components that we have. For example, we can use the list view to show these things. So we'll see how we can do that. So in order to make REST API calls or REST requests, Android has like very basic level communication mechanisms or communication protocols that we can use, but those are like very primitive when we are working with application. We need to develop things rapidly. So like what we did with loading images asynchronously, we use Glide as software, so we can use sorry, as we can use to retrieve the values. Okay, so in here the same thing we go. We will be using we'll be uh, we'll be using something like most popular library out there for making REST API calls, which we call retrofit. Okay, so retrofit is one of the commonly used application. So you guys will be able to see how retrofit works within our application. So basically, you guys need to find the dependency for the retrofit. After you find the dependency line, it's just a matter of implementing the retrofit client. So as we did yesterday, we will be going to the buyer module. Okay, within the buyer module, of course, you guys can see we have use Glide, which we use for showing images. So if you the same way, what we're going to do is we're going to find the dependency for retrofit. Okay, so let me go to the retrofit website and try to get the latest version of retrofit. Okay, I think it's in GitHub. I can clearly see the version. Right now, retrofit is having the latest version 2.9.0. So I'll be using that. So this is the dependency implementation that we need. Since we are using KTS, make sure to have retrofit retrofit dependency like this. Okay. So next thing that we need to do is retrofit is, as I mentioned, is a REST client. Okay, it's help us to get the it help us to make the request and everything. But another thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have a converter for the JSON request. So as I mentioned earlier, retrofit can do the REST calls, but as I mentioned, it is the conversation for the JSONs. You guys can see in our application. Um, so this is like the model that we have. uh, Within this model, what will happen is we have the representation in Kotlin, okay, but we are getting information in basic JSON format, so it's going to be something similar to string if you are working with that. So in a scenario like this, what will happen is, in order to work with that kind of application, that kind of thing, um, we will be needing a converter to do so. So Retrofit has most of the converters supported for us. So there are predefined, there are converters that is already matured enough. So one of the most popular one is a library called JSON. Okay, I'll be using JSON as the converter. So it is gonna be the piece of software that is gonna convert the REST APIs to actual conversion. The string conversion would be done by JSON. Okay, it's like what we call a serializer. Okay, so if you are new to serializers, have a look around that. Yeah, the basic fundamental thing is it's gonna read and understand JSON, so Retrofit can interact with that. Okay, so make sure to include a converter as well. Okay, sorry. So by defining a retrofit, another thing that we need to do is um, define a dependency for the converter. So I'll be using JSON converter. Right now, I think the version that yeah, the version that is there, which will work with the retrofit 2.9 is JSON version 2.0. It's sometimes it is not syncing up with the retrofit version as it is, but you can use the JSON version as defined in here. Okay, so you guys will be able to look into the converters, or even you can have your own custom converters, but it's like um, highly not that usable. If you have any application or you have some issues by using some libraries or some converters, probably you can build up your own right now. But what you can do is you can have retrofit like this. Okay, so I will most of the time I like give some sort of comment in here to identify what these things are all about. Image download and show. Retrofit, I would call this as REST API communication. Okay, so time to time, when your application grows, you don't know why these dependencies are there. So make sure have a little bit of note to a little bit of comment there to remind yourself why this is used in the first place. Okay. All right. So let me check. I think I have. Uh, so let me get. Let me get a dummy REST API client while the Gradle is still syncing. I'll let it do its job. Right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find an API. Okay, so I have found one of the APIs which gives me some free API games list. Okay, it's like quite a huge one, but let's see what I can do on that. Okay, so the game API that I have found is this one. So I'll be using the same API to retrieve information. There's like a lot of information in here, but we'll see how we can work with these items. So let me share my screen so you guys can see what I'm talking here. Share a new screen. This. Yeah, I'm talking about this API. Oops. Okay. So the API URL is free2games.com API games. So this is the view that you will see when you like want to interact with this, but it's not this one. I'm currently using Chrome. So this is by default making a GET request. By default, it's going to be something like this. The JSON would be something similar to this, but I'm using what we call a plugin, which will make the application looks little bit good like this. Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this API and try to get this information render out in my application. Okay. So how are we going to do that? Next thing that we're going to be discussing is how we're going to make sure that this is the one that will be showing on. Okay, so we got retrofit in. That's great. Next thing is we need to configure retrofit. We need to configure the retrofit in order to work with the application. But first thing first, I need to model the game according to the REST API configuration that we got. So if you guys can see that, if you guys can remember, the API showed a different input within the application, and within this application, we last time when we were working, we had a name, we had a description and image URL. But right now, the the approach that we're going to be getting, it is having a different mappings to it. So we will be using that mapping in order to make it work. Okay. So depending on API, how API is giving the data, we have to adapt to that. So we will be using uh, that as we go. Okay, so I have the model. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this. It will totally break my application in so many places. Okay, but let's keep it as it is. Okay, we don't have to worry that much on that. Okay, so the games are gone. Everything that we have put it in the section will be gone. So the UI probably gonna break because we have deleted a lot of things in here. The game list would not work as expected. The preview and everything will be shut down. So that is because we are trying to remodel our application. So if you guys can remember, I'm not sure whether you guys can clearly see, but I will take a sample application, uh, one single entry out of the REST API and try to model it. Okay. So let me put it in here so you guys can see um, the game itself. One game is represented something like this. It has an ID. Okay, so we do not have an ID, so I'll make this one ID. And remember, this is not a string. If it is a string in JSON, it is quoted in double quoted. ID is going to be a number, so the data type should be a number. Okay, let me zoom in so you guys can see clearly. Okay, so ID in here, in this case, it's going to be a number. Okay, and there is a title, which is going to be the game title, and the thumbnail, which is something like this image URL. Okay, so there are other things like short description, game URL, genre, platform, and all those things. If you like, we can map those things. But if you do not want to show these things within the application, we can skip those things. So there is no rule that says, okay, we need to map everything from in here. Only thing that we need to make sure is that it is representing, it is showing, it is giving the same name as the name that we have given in the REST API or the JSON file. Okay, next thing that we need to do is we have looked at the REST API, one single object. Now the next thing is going to be configuring this retrofit. Okay, so we have models, we have UIs in here. So I will make another package in here called config. Okay, config. Okay, so within this configuration package, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I'm going to create an API service or something that I can call and get all the information as I like. Okay, all right, so how I am going to do that? So I am going to be creating what we call an API service. So I've created a Kotlin class and I'll name this as API service. Okay. So within the API service Kotlin class, first thing I need to do is I need to know where my application is gonna call. So I will have something called base URL, and I will hard code the URL that I'm going to be using. So the URL that I'm interested in is this one. Okay. Even with that, the base URL will be the starting point of our application. I'll show you why the base URL is something different. Maybe sometimes we have different paths in REST APIs. Say, for example, in here, we had this path as games. Okay, so it will give us all the games that we need. Sometimes we might get all the publishers. Okay, something like this. So all of these things will be having a common endpoint. We call these things as endpoint. We have a common endpoint in here. So we call that as normally base URL. So the base URL, we will keep it, we will remove the dynamic part and keep the static part, which will be used by all of the uh, endpoints. So remember, there can be more than one endpoints that REST API can provide you. Okay. So next thing is I'm gonna create interface called API service. Okay. So within the API service, I am gonna create something that we're gonna do is suspend function get games. Okay, so this by calling this API, by calling this function using the API service get games function, I will retrieve list of games. Okay, so I'll be retrieving a list of games. So this is the API function that I am hoping to call, but it does not maintain where we are getting or whatsoever. Just if I call this, if I have the API service and if I call get games method, it will return a list of games, which is modeled like we modeled earlier on, something like this. Okay, so okay. So we'll be getting a list of games, something like this. So in this scenario, what we will gonna do is we will be making a get request for the games endpoint. Okay, we need to annotate that. So how we gonna do that? We will have a annotation called get, which we will be getting from retrofit to HTTP. Okay, then we need to provide the endpoint for the actual get games method. So what it will do is, if I call get games by using the API service, it will call the base URL and the games appended to it, and it will return all the games that that the REST API is providing and map everything according to this model. Okay, so we haven't configured fully, but as a nutshell, this is what it's gonna do. So even with this, it is not fully configured. We need to make sure that we configure retrofit. We haven't told where to use the base URL, how we can do this, how we're gonna connect our converter. So we have to make that option as well. So we'll be doing that. We'll be using a companion object, which is like a static object. Okay, companion object. And within this companion object, we'll first create an API service instance. So API service, and I'm going to call it API service. And it can be a nullable because we haven't configured this yet. Okay, so we'll be creating a companion object. So since this is a companion object, we can check if the API service is null. API service. Sorry. This is the companion object. We need to create instance. So I need to say function get instance. So in this companion object, what we'll have is API service have this static kind of method called get instance. So when we want to interact with the retrofit, we'll be calling this API service and get instance method. So we'll be creating something we call an API service. Okay, so we call this one as, well, we can call this something like a singleton. Okay, so if you know, if you are coming from design, if you have experience on design pattern, this is something what we call an API, what we call a singleton. Okay, if you do not know singleton, take a closer look at design patterns. The first thing that you will be learning is a singleton. So I'm creating a singleton in here. So before I forget, I need to return the API service because I promised that when I call this get instance method, I'll be returning an API service. So API service that I see in here, even though it is null, I'm returning it, but I can check for it. If API service equals null, that means if for some reason the first time this is null, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create an API service. So this is where we instantiate the retrofit. So in order to create this retrofit instance, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use the retrofit object, and there is a method called builder. Okay, so we call this as a builder pattern, and what I'm gonna do is at the end I'm gonna call build method. Okay, and I have to create API service dot class.java. Okay. So in here, let me show what it is doing in here. So I'm going to create a retrofit builder. Okay, I'm going to create a retrofit builder, and I'm going to use the build method. Okay, I'm going to create a retrofit build, and I'm going to create an instance of API service, which is going to be this. I'll be creating a API service based on the retrofit builder, and I will have this instance to make it happen. Okay, so now next thing that I'm going to do is and the next thing that I'm going to do is I have the builder, but I haven't fully configured everything with the rest of it. Especially, there are some configuration I need to do. I need to introduce the base URL to retrofit as well as a converter factory. So we will have the base URL builder pattern in here, and I will pass the base URL that we have hard coded in here. So when we are building a retrofit instance, okay, we are setting the base URL, which is going to be this one. And next thing that I need to do is introduce a converter factory. Okay, I should call add converter factory, and I can call JSON converter factory, and I have to call this create method. Okay, so let me zoom out a little bit. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a retrofit instance, setting a base URL, adding a converter, build it, and build a create a API service instance out of this. Okay, so this is, if you are new to these kind of things, you will be learning quite a few things in here, especially this section. What we are calling this is a singleton, and we have something uh, some implementation of builder pattern. So two design patterns are used in here. If you are curious about that, there is another course section in my YouTube channel that you can check on design patterns, but there are a lot of other resources where you can learn about design patterns. Pretty interesting stuff like common problems, solving mechanisms. Okay, those are not algorithms, by the way. Those are like solutions for different things that we can have. So the singleton that we are creating in here is we do not need every time when we want to get games, we do not want to create an API service out of retrofit. Okay, we will have one retrofit instance. We'll be reusing that all over again to make these connections. Okay, all right. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that, okay, we have the API connection, we have the we have the what do you call it? We have the UI. Okay, we have the model. Um, we have the model and we have the API connection. Now we need to glue these things together. Okay, so we need to make sure that these things will uh, these two will be glued together. So whenever we are calling the getGames method, it will retrieve all the information that we need and represent those things in here. So how we gonna do that? How we gonna make sure that that is gonna happen? So there are few ways that we can do. Okay, we can directly call the API service within our application. Okay, within our application and get the information, and we can just show those things without an issue. Okay, so we just create an instance of the API service, call the get instance, and within the instance, I can call the get games method. List of games will be retrieved to me. Okay, that is kind of a one way that we can do. Another way would be rather than we are doing um, this kind of we were doing that kind of approach. What we can do is we can create actually something what we call a MVVM architecture. Okay, MVVM architecture. So this is not gonna be like 100% we'll be using that. We'll try to create a basic view model. So we will be communicating effectively. Okay, so we have another module to talk about advanced view model and view model architectures. But right now we'll be looking at a very high level, very simple way of doing that communication. Okay, so how we gonna do a view and a view model differentiation? Simple enough. What we will do is we will create a view model. So this is like earlier on in Android application, we even in here we can actually get these things done without MVVM. Okay, we can simply create a mutable state, and using that mutable state, we can call these things out. But we'll try to make it more advanced this time. So we will be practicing throughout the application how to create a best view model and everything. Okay. So let me, we have the UI. I will create one thing called a package, a separate package, view models. Okay, view models. So we have UI. We can simply call these things even views, and we have models, and we have view models. Okay, so the view model is kind of like the glue that hold the application together, the view and the data that we have. How we're gonna connect those things will be done by this view model section. So how are we gonna do that? Normally, when we are creating a view model, what we will do is we will call the same name as it is. So it's going to be a game view model. So we know, okay, this is all about games view model or game. Since this is multiple games, we will call games view model. So we have a class of that, and we need to import view model. Okay, so we need to import something what we call a view model, which is coming from Android X lifecycle methods. So I'm creating a new view model out of existing Android lifecycle methods. So how we gonna are we gonna make the connection between the view and the view model? First, I will do the connection um, between the application, I'm sorry, between the API and the view model, then we will be using the view model in the view itself. Okay, so and first thing that we need to do is some values that I need to set. I will explain it a little bit later. Games, mutable, state, list of game. Okay, I'll explain these things once I do this coding. It will be easy. Well, it's gonna be games, and it's gonna be list of games. List of games, which I will be calling get in here, and it will return underscore games. Okay, and I will call a function get games. Okay, and I will have something called view model scope launch. API service, and I'm gonna call APIs API service dot get instance, and within that I will say try catch. There can be exceptions happening. Exception, and if an exception happens, I'll store that in error. It's gonna be a string by mutable cell. It's gonna be a basically empty string. Okay, so mutables basically it's gonna be a simple value. Why the type password? All right. Type mutable state has string by I think I haven't imported. That's fine. If an error happened, error equals e dot. Normally I get a message and to string. If I get it right, I will say games equal. First, I will clear the list for something else, and I will say games dot add all the API service dot get games. Okay. So could be private. Okay. I'll make it. I'll make it public because I'm going to use it in here. Okay, so in here, I have created a very simple view model. Okay, so let me explain what a view model does and how it's gonna be working. Okay, so a view model is some a section where, as I mentioned, we are giving the bridge between the data layer and the view itself. So the view model uh, will act as somebody in the middle to connect the API and the view itself. So in here, I have defined few things. One thing is a mutable list. Okay. So the mutable is a list uh, that we can add values and remove values as an observable. Okay, so this is something that we call an observable instance. So when we are creating a mutable state of list of games, that means I am creating a variable. In here, you guys can see I have make it private and I have underscored it. That means this variable underscore games is only available in the game view model only. And this is a mutable one. That means we can add and remove things. It will be like a um, changing variable. Okay. So, and we have another mutable state of error. That means this string will be changed by times. So you guys can change the error time to time. And there is one other thing, that is the games. So this one is like what we will call is this is the property, or um, this is the value that will be called by the UI itself. So this is like the front facing variable that we have. So if I call game view model dot games, it will be returning a list of games, and the get method, you guys can see it is returning all the games, which is the private mutable variable in here. So why this is happening? So it's a little bit out of scope of this application. You guys can see there is only a getter for these games. That means we can't update these games. Okay, we can't update this variable since there is no setter for this one. The view cannot update this one directly. Okay, they can only get this one. It is a principle of MVVM architecture. Bidirectional observability is there. That means only we can listen, we cannot change. So to keep that design intact, we use a variable called games, which is only having a getter method, and it is returning values from this mutable state. Okay, so this is the architecture that we are using in MVVM. Okay, we will learn MVVM in much more broader details right now. Just think this as a middleman who is communicating. Okay, so we have another function called get games. So in order to make sure that the games are fetched, okay, we can sometimes we might do not need to get the games um, when it is launching. Sometimes we need to get the games on press of a button, something like that. If some such a case happens, we use this get games method. So the next thing what will happen is the get games method will be running on a view model scope. Okay, so when you guys need to launch something that is gonna block the UI, it it is not running on the main thread. Okay, so this is one of the concepts that I want to introduce. So what will happen what will happen if we do if we try to interact within our Android application, which will block the UI. For example, we need to retrieve API information. The API information that we are trying to retrieve is in another server. Okay, so it is a REST API. We need to call that REST API. The REST API need to respond. So it is what it is gonna do is it's gonna take some time. Okay, it's gonna take some time. Why? It is going through multiple layers. It is going through multiple servers, and the connectivity we can't guarantee that is it's gonna be super speed. We can't guarantee the service will respond within 1 second. No. So in a case like that, what we do is while that request is going, while that thing is happening, what will be the state of your UI? Okay, your UI is running, Android is running. Your what you see, the UI that you are seeing, it is running on something what we call a main thread. Okay, that is like the main thread that we are running everything. The UI is running on the main thread that is like completely allocated for rendering the UIs. So while we are in the main thread, we are doing uh, some tasks. What we call these tasks are blocking tasks. Okay, UI blocking tasks. So or we sometimes we call these things as asynchronous task. Okay, the task, of course, it will be completed, but we can't guarantee when. Okay, it's going to take some time. So it will take some time. So while we are waiting to that request to be completed, your main thread, the thread is responsible for rendering a UI, will be stopped. Why? You have clicked a button, okay, you have clicked somewhere, then what will happen? That need to run in you need you it will need some time to go to the server, fetch the data, convert, and show it in the UI. So while we are doing that, our UI thread, the main thread will be blocked. If the main thread is blocked, our UI will be not responding. Okay, so sometimes you guys might have seen in your application when you click something, it is saying please wait, it is not responding. Do we want to kill this application? That kind of things happens. That's mainly because we are trying to do a blocking task in our main thread, the main thread which is responsible to running UI. Okay, if you are trying to do a blocking request within our main thread, what will happen? The main thread will get stuck, your application won't respond. So that is a bad use experience. So we don't need that kind of things to be happening. So how do we get rid of that? The easiest thing is if we have such a blocking task, okay, something like fetching information from internet. Sometimes there are like tasks like need huge computation. Uh, so huge computation, like maybe calculating pi to 1,000 decimal points. Okay, that is gonna take a little bit of time. The computer is like, it will need to allocate resource, this kind of thing. So it might need some time to complete. So while the task is running, what we'll do is we wouldn't run the long running task or asynchronous task or IO bound task within our main thread. We give another separate thread. Okay, run this piece of code. Once it is done, let me know what is the result. Okay, so in that scenario, what we need to do is we need to use a mechanism to run uh, our blocking codes in another thread, okay, in another process. You guys know that thread is like what we call a mini process. So we need to find a way to run that. Luckily, with Kotlin, uh, we have something called coroutines. Okay, so make sure you guys learn about coroutine in depth. Okay, so there are like three coroutine types. You have to learn those things. What are their main intention and everything. But in here we are using view model scoped coroutines. That means um, when we are done with these things, it will dispatch, it will say main thread, okay, whatever that you are running within this, after everything is done, we will update the main thread and say, okay, this is done. So if this is taking a little bit of time, it will take that time and get the information. And once it is done, it will update the main UI. So during that time, the UI will not get stuck because we are not running on the main thread, but in another thread. So in this scenario, a coroutine. So have a look at coroutines, how it is designed, what is the difference between coroutines and threads. So it's up to you guys to learn these things. I'm not going to go into details. Please have a look around those things and have a clear idea on coroutines, which is like, if you are doing Android development, you should know coroutines in one way or another. Okay, so we have this get game methods. We are running on a coroutine. And in here, what we are doing is we are calling that API service get instance method. If you guys can remember, get instance is what we call uh, we can make this private. Yes, uh, get instance is getting a singleton of API service. Okay, and this is gonna return an API service. Within that API service, we have a method called uh, get games. This API have a method called get games, which is this. Okay, so within this API service, what it will happen is um, it's gonna call HTTP the base URL. Since we have configured it, it will append the base URL and the tailing URL. And once it is done, it will give us a list of games. So it will return that list of games and will be added to this private mutable state. Okay, so first of all, what we'll do is, if there is anything, we will clear it out and we will be adding all those things to that. So once we have changed this, once we have add these changes to the variable, this variable will, since it is an observable, that means, okay, it's intelligent enough to say, okay, something has been added or removed from my something has been added or removed. So what I need to do is I need to inform anyone who is listening to this, okay, things have changed, my data has changed, so update your views according to that. Okay, so in here, the add all method, it's gonna say this games variable. Okay, my list of games will be changed, so please update your UI based on that. Okay, so that is kind of like the higher overview of this. Now we have the view model in place. Now we need to make sure we connect this view model to our application. Okay, so how are we going to do that? So I'll go to our main activity where our activity is created. In here, what I'm going to do is uh, I will I will create a view model in here. So I will instantiate a view model. You can say val view models, and it's going to be games view model. Okay, so now it is not having any dependencies. So I'm going to create a simple VM that is going to be called the games view model. So I am instantiating a view model like this. So I have done it in the onCreate method. The next thing that I'm going to do is within the game list, the component which is going to have, it is asking for list of games, right? Earlier on, it is asking for a list of games. I can even like uh, for uh, for preview purposes, I can have something like there. Right now, what I'm gonna do is, rather than throwing some games, I am gonna send them the VM. Okay, so it's gonna be a game view model. So let me comment this one for a second. Okay, right now, when I am instantiating, I am sending the VM itself. Okay, something like this. So the game list is expecting a VM, a view model. So I will say VM equal to this VM. Since this is having the same name, quick trick, I can omit that rather than having equal sign and VM. Since these are the same name, I can have it removed. It is something, it is same and equal to this. Okay, to keep some space, I'll make it like this. Okay, so now we have a reference to our VM. Okay, we have a reference to our VM. Within the VM, what we can do is we can access our information. Okay, how we can access our information? Right now we have vm.games. Okay, so rather than um, within the view model, if you guys can remember, we have a variable called games. What we can do is we can directly access that VM instance there, and vm.games will represent all the games, and we'll be able to get that list of games. Okay, now you guys can see the game row. It might be changed since we have changed the model. I have the thumbnail, I have the title in here, and in here I also have title, column description. Did I have something like that? I think we had something. Thumbnail, title. We'll show this the ID. No, not the ID. Let me try to get something better. I think there was something. Okay, I'll put the developer in here. So I'll have another variable developer. It's going to be string. So I'm changing the UI a little bit. So rather than the description, I will put it in here, the developer. Okay. So we have the image, we have the information, the title, and the developer. We do not need this. Do we have any errors? Okay, in the previous section, I would just remove it for now. And yeah, that would do. Yes, I do not think I have the information in here. That would do fine. So I have the view model, but the problem is we haven't. So if you guys can see, the games will be updated, only updated if I call the get games method. I need to call this get game method in order to make the network request. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a small modification in here. In here, I'll have a button, and on click section, what I'll do is I'll say I have the VM dot get games. Okay, so I have the button, then I'll put a text saying get games. Okay, for for easy reference, I would have something like this. Okay, so let me run this once and see whether it is working. Hopefully it should work. If it does not, that is even better. So my emulator is starting. Still the application is launching. Okay, don't need this. So if I click get games in here, there you go. So you guys can see the information that I am passing is showing in here, and image is one by one is loading in here. It will take a little bit of time because it has a lot of images. It has a lot of files. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna limit, because it's gonna have a lot of things. First thing first, I will column this. Okay, within a column. And when I'm saying get gains, I would like limit. I think I have Kotlin sub list. Let me stop that because it's gonna it's gonna have a lot of things. So I can say sub list if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, from 0 to like I will take 10. So what I'm gonna do is while the API service is getting all the information, I will only add from 0 to 10. That in that way I'm not overpopulating all the images. It has like 300 games. So I'm not interested in all. I'm just gonna go with first 10. Okay, let me run it once again. Okay, I have can click the get games method. Okay, you guys can see it is loading only like 10. Yes, you guys can see the images and everything is popping up in here. Thumbnail is loading, and since we have put a placeholder, the placeholder is working as well. So the UI, don't worry about the UI that much. Okay, I'm not like it is not like the perfect UI that you would see, but at least you guys get the idea. It is working as expected. When I click on it, it is getting all the information from internet and show it in here. Now, when we are doing that, I'm using a view model, which is like best practice. So when we are so it separates our logic from our UI, so that we will learn about that thing in much more details. For right now, we'll just stick to this. Okay. Okay. So to save some time, I'm not showing every game that I am getting from the API. I'm only showing like 10. Okay. So it's like really easy to handle. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time to download all those 300 games. And that's insane. Okay, so we were able to get um, the games that we have found from there into our application. Now we have make it happen using this click button. But for some reason, let's assume that when we don't need this button to do the job, but instead of that, I need to um, make sure that this is done automatically. Okay, that this function, this thing will be called when I am starting the application. So we can do that. We have something called launch LAU, launched effect. Okay, so the launch effect will take the first one is the key. I'll just say void. I don't need a key to track this thing. Sorry, unit. And the block that I am gonna do, or what's I'm gonna do when this is happening. So rather than calling the get when on touch. So right now, the button would call VM.get games. Other than that, what I will use is launched effect. And within this, I will call the VM.get games. So it will automatically call the VM.get games rather than me clicking on a button. So I can remove the button as well. So it will take a little bit time and we can see if it is working. Seems to be it's not working. No. VM.getGain should work. By default, it should run. I'm not sure why it is not. Let me put a logcat here. Log B. I would say game list, which is the tag. I would say call in